Welcome Ultrawide fans. Today we're going to look at the feasibility of path tracing at our 4 Ultrawide resolutions to see if there's any reasonable way to get a playable experience in Cyberpunk 2077 when using it with an RTX 4090. First, we will look at the performance and memory usage. Then we'll check out the visual improvements over raster and standard Ultra RT to determine if the pretty is worth the performance cost. Now, let's jump into those benchmarks. Starting off with our 3440 by 1440p ultra-wide resolution, we see even using the mighty RTX 4090, we are seeing sub 30 FPS results, roughly half of what we would get from ultra ray tracing. Using DLSS quality, we see over double the performance, and it gets us close to 60 but not quite there. It manages to match the performance results of the Ultra RT without any DLSS, and the path tracing plus only frame generation results. Using DLSS quality and frame generation together increases the frame smoothness to a nice high 96 FPS, which is an increase in frame rate of 66%, not quite the doubling of performance they like to talk about, or that we see when using only frame generation without DLSS, making it 8% faster than the Ultra Ray Tracing plus DLSS, and 15% slower than the raw raster results. DLSS doesn't seem to do much for the raster performance in this game. If you want better than 60 FPS at 3440 by 1440p when using an RTX 4090, you will need to use every trick in Nvidia's book. This, however, will come with a latency penalty. How significant that is, I hope to find out for you all later. Or take the additional visual hit of lowering your DLSS render resolution. Moving to 3840 by 1600p ultra-wide resolution, we see a modest decrease in performance. Unupscaled path tracing is nearly the same sub 30 FPS performance as it was at 3440 by 1440. With path tracing plus DLSS, ultra ray tracing, and path tracing plus frame generation all sliding 18% further away from 60 FPS, making them less of an acceptable experience and more of an unacceptable one. Path tracing plus DLSS and frame generation is still clearing 60, getting 80 FPS of frame smoothness, a 63% performance improvement over path tracing plus DLSS quality, and still 17% slower than the raster results. And the DLSS results aren't really worth mentioning. Not too much difference in the performance situation at this resolution versus what we saw at 3440 by 1440. At our 5120 by 1440p Super Ultrawide resolution, we see low 20s for our raw path tracing results. And now, with path tracing plus DLSS wholly in unacceptable range, along with ultra ray tracing, and path tracing plus frame generation. When we look at path tracing plus DLSS and frame generation, we still clear 60 with a 71 FPS frame smoothness, matching the ultra ray tracing DLSS results. 65% faster than path tracing plus DLSS, and 15% slower than the raw raster. And we still see terrible DLSS results. Here we see that at our 3 more common ultra-wide resolutions, with the full onslaught of Nvidia features, you can get above 60 FPS frame smoothness with only a penalty to latency, but not really much of one to visuals. But moving up to our final resolution of 5120 by 2160, we can see a severe performance hit, with our path tracing results only at 15 FPS. Even with DLSS, it barely clears 30, along with the ultra ray tracing results. But this time, the path trace frame generation results suffer with bad stuttering and low 1% lows. I believe that the 15 FPS it is trying to work from is just too low to actually function properly, because when we turn on DLSS as well, we see no more stuttering, but we are still not able to get to 60 FPS when path tracing, even with DLSS quality and frame generation both on. The frame rate performance is now 4% slower than ultra ray tracing with DLSS quality, and 14% slower than raster performance. With DLSS performance, not even a slight increase over the base raster. I even tried FSR to see if that would work better, but I got the same kind of performance. So raster performance in Cyberpunk just doesn't scale well with any kind of upscaling techniques. If you wanted to get 60 FPS at this resolution, you need to step down another resolution level in DLSS while still using frame generation. Let's take a look at the video memory requirements for running path tracing. At 3440 by 1440p, just using the raw path tracing, we see 14.9 GB of memory usage. Path tracing plus DLSS lowers that cost to 13.3 GB, and path tracing plus frame generation uses a whopping 16 GB of memory. And path tracing plus DLSS and frame generation bring things back down to 13.3 GB of memory usage, which may not kill the 4070 Ti's 12 GB of memory, but I would have to do further testing to find out. For our 3 higher resolutions, we'll only look at path tracing for academic purposes, and path tracing plus DLSS and frame generation, since this is the only mode that gets near 60. At 3840 by 1600, we see path tracing use 15.5 gigabytes, and path tracing plus DLSS and frame generation use 14.2 gigabytes of memory. At 5120 by 1440, we see path tracing use 18 gigabytes, and path tracing plus DLSS and frame generation use 15 gigabytes of memory. At our final resolution of 5120 by 2160, we see path tracing use 20 gigabytes of memory, and path tracing plus DLSS and frame generation use 17.3 gigabytes of memory, even more than the 4080 has. All in all, path tracing I would say sits firmly in the future tech category. It's just too demanding for modern cards. Let's look at the visual improvements to see what we can be looking forward to in the future. Let's first compare just the raster results to the new path tracing results, so you can get the full effect of the improvements path tracing has over traditional lighting techniques. Let's start off with the most eye-popping change first, which is the neon sign, which is now casting pink light on everything around it and reflecting off the wall behind it. Not only is it casting its light around it and coloring the environment, it is a richer and deeper color to boot. The plant in the corner now blends into the environment rather than sticking out due to the lighting in the environment not reacting with it. The raster image seems to be primarily lit from a single strong point light above the door, and you can see the harsh shadows on the bouncer's clothes, and the sides of the metallic pole facing us are all in shadow. They do simulate the pink glow from the neon sign on the back of the bouncer, though the sign is not actually shining any light. The point light seems to be not properly occluded by the wall where the light bar is, based on the fact that the bead curtain is lit by the light. The harsh point light is casting an extremely bright highlight on the bouncer's hair, making it seem almost metallic. When we look over at the path trace side, we see the scene lit by the dozen or so light sources in the area, washing out the shadows and filling them in with bounce lighting, so you can see only the shadows right where her feet meet the floor. And if you watch when she moves, you see the shadow extend behind her, but it's almost all filled in by the pink light from the neon sign. The beaded curtain is no longer lit directly thanks to the lights being properly occluded, allowing light from the inside to shine through more brilliantly. The metallic pole is now being lit from multiple angles, so we can see that it is a chrome finish instead of the satin finish it looks like to have in the raster side. When looking at the bouncer, the lighting is so drastically changed that it looks like she changed her pants. Now that they are being lit from multiple lights, and I'm assuming it is now using a material profile to provide proper reflectivity and light scatter. Overall, the shadows on her are much softer, and her hair now looks like neon pink hair instead of a pink metallic helmet. And you see the pink light on her back now extends to her skin instead of ending at the pants. That was a lot of things that path tracing is doing that raster isn't. Are there any advantages to the raster image in this scene? Well, there's one big one, and that is the raster image is sharper, in a way that is noticeable. And I honestly like the more dramatic lighting on the bouncer, aside from the metallic hair, even if it's not true to the overly lit scene she's standing in. Now let's compare the ultra ray tracing results with the path traced ones. Here we can see they are much closer, but we still see the ultra ray tracing results using an artificial point light and just ray tracing the results rather than having all the natural light sources producing light like path tracing does. The point light is still a bit harsh, with toned down but still bright highlight in her hair, and the shadows on her pants are also toned down by the bounce off of the floor, but are still not being lit by all the light sources in the area. The pole now looks chrome, but is still not reflecting all the off-screen light sources. The plant and trash can are appropriately lit by the available brighter light source, and the bead curtain is appropriately shadowed. Since the interior lights are true light sources on the path trace side, we see them reflecting more strongly off the interior floor and even shining through the bead curtain. The ray tracing is a very good middle ground between the raster and the path tracing, and while the environment looks better in the path tracing side, from the neck down I like the look of the RT lighting on the bouncer. Now let's check out a scene I've seen a million times, the benchmarking one. Once again we'll first compare raster to the path tracing. We see a pretty identical presentation for the pool players. The bottles on the table do look more real, and the brim of the woman's hat is properly shadowing her face in the path trace presentation. Some more pretty equal visuals, but when we get to the bar, we see some glaring issues with the raster presentation. The bartender and the bar patrons are overly lit for the scene, and the seats are glowing blue underneath the patrons' butts. When looking at the path trace side, everything looks natural and correct. The The second pool table raster holds up pretty well. And in the little room we can see some nicer reflections from the path tracing side. The reflections in this large pool of water are just much nicer with path tracing. And the shadows from the trees are much softer and more natural. But here we see raster's big advantage, draw distance on the shadows. We see some pop in with the path trace shadows that can be distracting. And again, the raster image is just sharper. Now let's compare the Ultra RT to the path trace results. The pool table looks pretty much the same. The bottles maybe still look a bit better with path tracing, but both faces are now shadowed. More of looking pretty much the same. But when we get to the bar scene again, we see the bartender and patrons being lit by an artificial light, and the seats under their butts are still glowing. It must be a baked lighting map. We see more of mostly the same until we get to the door. In the smaller room, we see the puddle on the ground reflecting the vending machine on the path trace side, but not the RT side. The large puddle outside looks great in both sides. Shadows look pretty much the same and have the same pop-in issue. So there you have it. Cyberpunk path tracing looks pretty amazing, but it is so punishing you'll want something that makes the 4090 seem tame. If you like these Ultrawide focus videos, please subscribe for more. And if you want me to test path tracing on more cards, leave a comment below. And check out some of my other game benchmark videos. Thank you and have a great day.